It was a lazy Saturday morning when I discovered Karen's sisters had decided my boats were fair game. They didn't knock, didn't ask. They just took them for a quick ride on the lake. At first, I thought it was a simple misunderstanding, but one look at the empty docks told me otherwise. Every boat I owned, some vintage, some custom-built, was now floating out on the water, in the hands of people who had no right to touch them. I called the lake patrol to report the theft, knowing full well that I had jurisdiction over the area. But this wasn't going to be a simple call. Karen's sisters were notorious for testing boundaries, convinced that my ownership didn't matter because the HOA had rules in place. What they didn't anticipate was that I had connections far beyond the HOA, including the Coast Guard, who had a long-standing relationship with me due to prior water safety initiatives. By the time the sisters realized I was serious, Coast Guard boats were already patrolling the lake, intercepting the stolen vessels with precision. The sisters tried to explain themselves, but their excuses dissolved as quickly as their confidence. They hadn't accounted for the fact that my private security and the Coast Guard could coordinate seamlessly, making any escape attempt impossible. When the Coast Guard arrived at the docks to retrieve the boats, the sisters panicked. One of them attempted to argue that they had borrowed the boats with permission, but there was no legal or logical basis for their claim. Officers documented the theft, issued citations, and escorted the sisters off the water. By the end of the day, every boat was returned safely, undamaged, and the sisters were left with a humiliating record and a severe lesson in trespassing. The HOA, of course, tried to intervene, claiming my response was excessive. I simply reminded them that the property and the boats were mine, that any unauthorized use constituted theft, and that the Coast Guard's involvement was entirely legal and necessary to prevent further escalation. The HOA quietly retreated, realizing their interference had only made things worse. The sisters were banned from the property permanently, their misadventure becoming the talk of the neighborhood. Karen herself avoided direct confrontation for weeks, knowing that any attempt to reclaim influence would be met with the same swift, decisive authority. The incident reinforced the simple fact: ownership matters, preparation matters, and testing someone who has connections with law enforcement and the Coast Guard is a mistake that doesn't end well. By sunset, the lake was calm, the boats securely docked, and my property untouched. The sisters had learned a lesson in humility. Karen's ego was bruised, and the HOA's attempts to meddle had completely backfired. The story circulated quickly, a cautionary tale of entitlement meeting authority. In the end, control over my property remained absolute, and any future attempts to challenge it would be met with the same unstoppable force.